I used AI to predict League of Legends matches, and it actually worked. I've always been obsessed with one thing: predicting the future, especially in competitive games. As to why League of Legends, League actually has something that not many other games do, and that is the draft phase. Before the match even starts, the teams take turns picking and banning from over 170 champions. You can think of it like a little chess game before the actual chess game. And you see, that's where it gets interesting, because unlike in other esports or sports, you kinda actually know the whole strategy before the match even begins. So here's the theory: if two teams are equally strong and they don't make any mistakes, you should always be able to guess who wins just from who has the better draft. Of course, in reality, no teams are perfectly equal and everyone makes mistakes. But it made me wonder, how much does the draft actually matter? And that's exactly what you'll find out at the end of the video. But here's how I made it happen. At first I thought, if I can just get a huge table which contains the composition of Team 1, the composition of Team 2, and who won, that's pretty much it, right? Wrong. You see, unlike traditional sports, esports are constantly changing and evolving. There are these things called patches that tweak how the game and the champions work. If a champion is too strong, they usually get nerfed, and if a champion is too weak, they usually get buffed. So basically, after a couple of patches, you're pretty much playing a different game. That means I couldn't just use every match ever played, because the older data would be irrelevant. I had to think about what my goal actually is, and that is to predict the pro-level games at the mid-season invitational, and that meant that I could only focus on the last page that the MSI will be played on. Millions of games are played every day, and so that should still leave me with a lot of data. Except, I was wrong again, because of this one little problem: skill. So in League of Legends, players are ranked from Iron all the way up to Challenger. And just to give you an idea of how insane the skill distribution is, more than 50% of all the players are ranked Silver or below, while only about 2% ever make it into Diamond. And pro players? Well, they're built different. So obviously I couldn't just look at the Silver games when I wanted to be able to predict the pro players. You see, machine learning models need data, and I mean a lot of data. But they also need good data. There's this saying that goes, garbage in, garbage out. And so I had to stick with only the highest ranks, and that are the Challenger and the Grandmaster. And that pretty much means just the top 1000 players from each server. I was able to get the data from the 3 of the biggest regions, which are Korea, Europe, and NA, and unfortunately the data from the Chinese server wasn't publicly available. So that gave me 3000 players, for which I pulled all their recent matches using the Riot API, and this actually looked like I had a lot of data until I realized that these players pretty much play each other all the time, and so I had to remove the duplicate matches, and I ended up with 56,368 unique matches. Not millions, like I hoped, but still a very high quality dataset. So now I had everything I needed. A big table with champions for Team 1, champions for Team 2, and who ended up winning. I split the data into a training set and testing set and decided on my model, which would be the random forest. If you do not know what a random forest is a type of machine learning model that uses a bunch of decision trees. Each one of these decision trees decides on their prediction, and then they all combine together and vote on the final answer. It's super simple, it's fast, and usually works very well with tabular data. So I trained the model, I tested it, and the result was 51.16%. Not exactly what I was hoping for. I mean, that's pretty much a coin flip. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I mean, maybe the problem wasn't the model. You see, currently, the model could only see the champions just as you or I do. And that is just their names. Gangplank, Viego, LeBlanc, Aphelios, Renata. That's not much context. So I thought, what if I would help the model understand the champions better? Instead of treating each champion as just a name, I would represent the champions as vectors based on what they do. Their role, the damage type, utility, crowd control, etc. This way the model could see similarities. So if you had 2 similar drafts, but in one the support would be Leona and in another the support would be Nautilus, the model could see that the champions serve a similar role as they're both tanky supports with crowd control. So I got excited again, I reran everything and got the result of 52.5%. Yes, you heard it right, a massive 1.3% improvement. Which is basically nothing, and it's still just a coin flip. That's when my hopes and dreams were officially crushed. The MSI has started, and I was just watching from the sidelines thinking that there must have been a way to make it work. And that's when I noticed something. The MSI had a very specific meta, which is short for most effective tactics available, and it's basically what the players agree on to be the best set of strategy and champions to play. And while my 55,000 game dataset had some sort of a meta, it was all over the place because it was based on random solo queue games. But at MSI, the meta was way more pronounced and focused. And I was thinking that it would surely work if my 55,000 game dataset would be from the MSI meta. And that's when the machine learning concept of pre-training and fine-tuning comes in. You pre-train a model to understand a broad concept, and then you fine-tune it at a smaller dataset so it becomes really good at a specific task. You can think of it like teaching ChatGPT English at the beginning so that it understands the language, and then fine-tuning it to do whatever afterwards. So I realized I already had a pre-trained model. It understood the general concept of the league draft, and so all I had to do now was fine-tune it on the MSI meta. And so I pulled all the MSI games that already happened up until now, which was 38 matches in total, and I used them to fine-tune the model. Then I split those games into a training and a testing set and ran it again. And the result? Almost 95% accuracy. That's right, 94.74%. But then reality hit me. That number is way too good to be true. There's no way you can predict 95% of games purely based on draft. So the model is likely overfitting. Overfitting happens when a model memorizes the data instead of actually learning some meaningful patterns from it. So to double check, I ran something called a k-fold cross-validation, which is like testing your model multiple times on different chunks of data to make sure it just didn't get lucky. And this time, the results actually made sense, as I achieved an average accuracy of 63% plus or minus 10.5%. Now that's actually really good news because it means that with such a small fine-tuning sample, the model will likely have the accuracy of somewhere between 52 and 73%. That's already likely more than random, and if it leans more towards the upper range, that's actually game-changing, because it would mean that the draft phase alone can explain a massive part of who actually wins a competitive game. Keep in mind that my model doesn't know anything about who is playing. It doesn't know who G2 is, it doesn't know who T1 is, it doesn't even know Faker. It only sees the drafts and it makes a prediction. So the day finally came. I had the model ready and the matches were about to start. First up, G2 versus FlyQuest. So I'm currently watching the draft on Casual's stream. And Bwipo just locked in Garen. I finally made it work. I have like 3 models I want to compare. I'm pretty sure that I have like no data on Garen, almost. At least not from the MSI draft that I fine-tuned on. But let me run the model and tell you who's going to win. So we're just starting the game, so it's not rigged. I'll quickly run it and tell you the results. Okay, so the game is starting right now. And my models, all of them are favoring FlyQuest slightly in this game, although Kadriel is saying that G2 has better draft. Also, I think Master just like lost Flash right now. Exactly right now. It's still 0-0. So, I don't know. We'll see. And FlyQuest actually won. In fact, it won all 3 games, just as my model predicted. At first I thought, okay, well, that's maybe just my luck. So I kept going. AL versus Gen.G, 4 out of 5 games correct. CFO versus MKOI, 3 out of 4 games correct. And after that, something strange happened with BLG versus T1. My model was really confident that BLG had the better draft in 2 of the games, but T1 ended up taking all 3. And so if any pro players or draft analysts are watching, I'd love to hear your take. If you remember the MSI meta and don't look at the nameplates, who should actually win? I'm actually quite intrigued. Anyway, I kept running the predictions throughout the MSI, and in the end ended up with 30 correct and 12 incorrect predictions, or about 71.4% accuracy. And that's not luck anymore, because that's statistically significant. But it got me thinking, maybe this MSI was just a weird tournament. I mean, maybe it was all just luck. Well, good thing the Esports World Cup happened right after, because I got the chance to predict all of the matches as well. So I ran my model on all of the matches and ended up with 24 correct and 9 incorrect predictions, or about 72.7% accuracy. And that consistency is what blew me away. 2 tournaments and almost identical accuracy, which means the model's not guessing. It actually understands something about the draft. Across both tournaments combined, the model managed 54 correct predictions out of 75, or 72% accuracy exactly. Now, that might not sound crazy at first, but assuming that all these teams were kinda equally matched, if you were to bet purely based on my predictions, with the average odds on a match being 1.5, you would actually get 8% return on investment every game. Now, 8% might not sound like much, but it's basically free money. But seriously, this experiment proved something quite amazing. It's actually possible to predict pro-level League of Legends matches just from the draft phase. The only thing you need is for the teams to be at least somewhat equally matched. And for those of you who are wondering what percent of the game is actually explained by the draft, it's 44%, with the rest of the 56% being left up to the gameplay. But keep in mind that my sample was quite small, and so the more matches you would look at, the number would probably shrink a bit, but still, that's quite high. So if you enjoyed the video and you would like to see me repeat this again for Worlds, and who knows, maybe even throw some money on the predictions this time, let me know in the comments. Make sure to smash like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more.